18th translation. Srila Sukadeva Goswami said, after Lord Brahma had thus spoken, glorifying the Supreme Lord's activities and prowess, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's never subject to death like an ordinary living being, appeared from the womb of Aditi. His 4 hands were decorated with a conch shell, club, lotus, and disc. He was dressed in yellow garments, and his eyes appeared like the petals of a blooming lotus. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The word Amrita Bhuhu is significant in this verse. The Lord sometimes appears like an ordinary child taking birth, but this does not mean that he is subject to birth, death, old age. One must be very intelligent to understand the appearance and activities of the Supreme Lord in his incarnations. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.9. One should try to understand the Lord's appearance and disappearance, and his activities are all divyam or transcendental. The Lord has nothing to do with material activities. One who understands the appearance, disappearance, and activities of the Lord is immediately liberated. After giving up his body, he never again has to accept a material body, but this is transferred to the spiritual world. So, let's meditate on the appearance of Vamanadev. Let's go into this Leela with our meditation. We see a yagya going on. There is Shukracharya reciting mantras, Bali Maharaj sitting, Om Namama. The yagya is going on and the smoke is appearing, and through those sacred smoke of the yagya, which is meant to please Mahadev, Lord Shiva, a beautiful boy started to walk. He was very small, just like you saw in the altar of Jagannath, how he's looking so cute, so tiny. But his presence was filling the whole sky. His Brahmin thread was shining like lightning, and his deer skin was rested on his tender shoulders. And then he was carrying a tiny pot of water swung by his side, and above him he held a yellow umbrella, and it was curved like the moon. And step by step he moved, not hurried, not proud, but he had this quiet grace of someone who already owns the whole earth beneath his feet. And then the priests just paused. Their mantra started faltering, and then all the warriors in the yagya started whispering, "Who is this child? Who is this? Who is this?" Even the fire god seemed to lean forward to catch the glimpse of this beautiful boy. Then Bali Maharaj's heart just started stirring, drawn by the innocence and this beauty of this little dwarf boy. And this was no ordinary boy. And Bali Maharaj felt a little bit unsettled by the power and the presence of this little boy that he could not name. At the same time, he also felt attracted. So this was a child who was carrying infinity on his side and boss of the world. And then yet he was walking very softly. He was walking towards the Yagya Kund, and that moment would change the history, would change the world, it would change the relationship between the devas and the demigods and the demons. Chalayasi vikramane balimadbhuta vamana padanaka nirajanita janapavana keshavadrita vamana rupa jaya jagadisha hare jaya jagadisha hare jaya jagadisha hare. Oh, wondrous Vamanadev, who tricked the mighty Bali with his little steps. The water that was bathed of Vamanadev's toenails became Ganges. And when he pierced this universe, the whole universe became purified. So all glories to that Vamanadev. I want to set this frame of today's meditation, the talk. We will look into what's the difference between true prosperity and wealth. Because we see in this pastime of Bali Maharaj that prosperity comes from surrender to the Lord, not really hoarding to power. And in my profession, I studied Vedic astrology, and so there is the astrological lens that Srimad Bhagavatam brings, the psychology of Shukra, Shukracharya, the material security, the diplomacy, the sense of being able to make right decisions so that you can enjoy life. So pragmatism, the materiality of being very practical, all these things is ruled by Venus. And on the other hand, every deity, every planet, like Shukra, Venus, has Shukracharya as the in charge, the president of Shukra. And then above him, there is a specific Vishnu avatar who rules over. So for Venus, it's Venus, Shukracharya, and Parashurama. And then we're coming to Jupiter. Jupiter in Vedic astrology is ruled by Brihaspati. Brihaspati is the guru of the demigods, and Shukracharya is a guru of the demons. And in Vedic astrology, it's Jupiter ruled by Brihaspati, and Brihaspati is ruled by Vamanadev. So that's actually the very interesting connection. So Shukracharya and Vamanadev is basically Venus and Jupiter. There is like a fight there. So I also wanted to look into how Bhagavatam goes into the depth of the psychology of both these lords. Who are these personalities? They're both devotees. They have their missions. So we'll kind of go into pray to understand the relevance of this pastime in our lives, so how it can unfold in a Krishna conscious way for us, and also the broader understanding of guru. Yesterday, Kante Prabhu was speaking about the levels of understanding the guru. Even in our ISKCON movement, we have had very charismatic gurus, very, very powerful, very intelligent, and then they initiated so many people, but when that person had the trouble and they left, people also left, because the understanding of guru was very neophyte. So we don't relate only guru to the person, but we are actually going beyond the charisma of the person. We are actually trying to understand the guru tattva. Otherwise, we become lost when the individual gets lost. So this was not Bali Maharaj at all. He did not get lost, and Shukracharya was a little bit doing his duty, of course. So the question we can all hold in our hearts today is, in my choices, which guru am I following? What is my alignment to guru? What is my alignment to Krishna? So it's a very introspective question that we can all ask throughout this day today, actually. Let's go a little bit of a background. This is 18th chapter. We would have to go a little bit back 3 chapters. We go to 15th chapter, and 16th chapter describes how Shukracharya, how powerful Shukracharya was. He had Sanjeevani Vidya. He could revive dead people. Literally in the war, nobody would die because everybody would die, but Shukracharya would bring them back to life. Oh my God, that's such a power to have. It's like, you imagine all this war going on. If there's a country that's not going to actually have any dead soldiers because they have a commander-in-chief who can revive all the dead soldiers. So it's like really empowered by mystic powers. Again, it's empowered by mantras, it's siddhi. And Bali Maharaj, by this time, we are reading this Leela of Vamana Devi, he's already conquered 3 worlds. And the Devas, they have lost their posts. And then Aditi, who's the mother of the Devas, she actually makes her own body sacrifice arena. She performs sacrifices to please the Supreme Lord. So through that austerity, Krishna comes and promises Aditi that I'm going to appear as your son and I will restore balance in the world. Again, we have to remember the Lord is never partial, never. But he's always trying to restore balance. So there is an imbalance happening here. It's not about demigods or devas, it's an imbalance in the consciousness. So he is going to correct the consciousness, both of the devas, who had become proud and they have lost everything now. And now he's going to restore the balance the other side. So if we have to look at this from a particular perspective, the devas have kind of become homeless. Imagine losing the kingdom, losing the throne, the gods of heaven. Indra has become fearful, his crown has fallen like tired stars from the sky. All these devas are becoming very weak. That's not really their nature. And then mother's power, the mother's power is really highlighted here. The mother's vow is what makes the whole pastime actually happen. It becomes a doorway for the Lord to actually come as a child and fix the situation. And then on the other side, we're actually looking at Shukracharya. Shukracharya is a very complex figure. He's actually devoted guidance. He's also trained by the same guru as Brihaspati. They were co-students in the same class. He was known for his own loyalty and loyalty of his disciples. He was actually aligned to God's will and trying to do his own purpose in his own way. He was spiritually brilliant as well. But something unexpected can happen when it's battlegrounds of life. So let's understand a little bit about Shukracharya and his leniency and where does he come from? Who is he? Shukracharya is also Ushana's. In Bhagavad Gita, actually, Krishna says that among the intelligent, I'm Ushana. So actually, Shukracharya is not an ordinary person. He's the son of Bhrigu Muni, the sage Bhrigu, and that makes him the grandson of also Brahma. And he's widely recognized among devas, among the everybody in the upper worlds and lower worlds. He's recognized as a great teacher of the Daityas, Asuras. But we can also see, like, why did he become the guru of the Asuras? Why he didn't become guru of the devas? And like I said earlier, it symbolizes in Vedic astrology, it's also Venus planet. He's in charge of that. He's also a scholar. He's known as a healer because the semen in our body is Shukra. Shukra actually literally means semen. So that's the tejas, the ojas, the ability, the strength that we have to keep going is coming from there. So he's a healer as well. He was trained by Angirasa. Angirasa was the teacher and guru of Brihaspati and also of Shukracharya. They studied together, but often Shukra actually felt a little bit overlooked at times, probably, but also he would feel that it's not fair that the Daityas were not given equal chance. So he was that kind of a teacher. So it is described that he later on kind of went away because Brihaspati was chosen as the guru for the devas, and he went and did very severe tapasya to Lord Shiva, and he gained the Sanjeevani Vidya. He learned how to revive the dead. And then this made him like no other. And that's the reason that Bali Maharaj approached Shukracharya to become the guru. And then he became very powerful between this battle between the Asuras and the Devas. And so it could go on and on, cosmic battle. He became like a very powerful personality. And 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is pretty advanced. We must actually have a level of depth and broader level of intelligence to see these characters, understand their background, understand how when Brihaspati becomes appointed as the guru of the devas, and then Shukracharya, he decided, like, I have to uplift these demons because everybody has a right to perform dharma. We cannot just discard these demons as, oh, these are demons, just let them just loose and be. No, we have to give them also dharma. So Shukracharya's intention and motivation was to guide these demons on the path of dharma, but a little bit like this. Not to feed them like directly, but a little bit indirectly. He would say, you want to enjoy, right? But you have to do some tapasya. You have to enjoy, right? But you have to follow the rules. So there was a little bit of a, he's like first grade level of dharma, trying to teach them how to be a little bit more dharmic. So that's one of the explanations. Then there's another point that because Shukracharya was very powerful, the Asuras were really, really reliant on Shukracharya. So when we become very dependent on the Guru, and we know that the Guru is going to take us to a certain destination, we are willing to do anything. So in another angle, Shukracharya was able to gain the loyalty of all these demons because of his powers. So in other words, if we look at Venus as a planet in this material world, that's what rules the world. It's money, it's power, it's wealth, and that's ruled by that planet. So even the major events, if we look at churning of the ocean, Shukracharya has a very strong role there. And okay, did I quote that verse? Yeah, Bhagavad Gita 10.37. That's where Krishna says, among great thinkers, I am Ushana. Earlier I said intelligence, but it's actually among great thinkers, I'm Ushana, Shukra. Why? Why is about great thinkers? How is Shukracharya connected to great thinker? Again, right? Thinking of diplomacy, thinking of how to secure yourself, how to win, how to gain wealth. This is very much a great thinker type of quality. And then the way he would mentor these asuras was a great responsibility for him. It was very heavy responsibility, and he was not malicious. He was always trying to be protective, trying to guide. So this is important to understand that his tactics may seem twisted, but they actually come from somewhat of a dharmic mood. Similarly, in our life also, material stability, wealth, on an individual level or on an organizational level, we do need big temples, beautiful temples. We do need to offer several times a day beautiful bhoga for the Lord. So the prasadam offering, we can call it in the material context of planets, beautiful plate, nicely cooked in ghee, and the different sweets is Venus. But then how we offer to the Lord, the bhava, the mood of offering. Am I chanting the mantras to the Lord? Am I doing it to please the Lord? That would become more the Jupiter aspect when we're speaking from like on the conscious level, on the microcosm level of what is my intention. In the Dashavatara Stuti, one of our Vaishnava acharyas, Vadiraja Tirtha, he actually goes to describe Bali Maharaj and his psychology and his loyalty to Shukracharya. Pingaksha Vikrama Turangadi Sainya Chaturanga Valipta Dhanuja Shangadvarasta Bhali Sangavapata Hrishikanga Maralinutate. So he is describing this Bali Maharaj. He chose Shukracharya to be his guru. And through that, the powers, just like Srimad Bhagavatam is describing how powerful Shukracharya was to revive. Similarly, Bali Maharaj, how is that? The whole description is there about how he had horses and cavalry and, let me just go to that translation. Horses, elephants, chariots, cavalry, infantry, army, chaturanga bala. So Bali Maharaj already had qualification to request Shukracharya to be his guru. And then he was himself powerful and courageous like a lion. And he had trained all his army to also be very courageous like lions. But it also says, this is Vaishnava Acharya says, but because of this, they were very egoistic and proud. So they also used to sometimes, they also used to do burnt offer through Vedas. And these yagas were without Vishnu's remembrance. So they were offering all these yagyas, they were offering all these oblations, but it was not to actually invoke the presence of Vishnu. So it actually were defective. It was actually incomplete. Then Bali Chakravarti also started one such yagya. So that's the yagya that Vamanadev went to. That's where Vamanadev manifested. And Bali Maharaj, who was the leader of the yagya, later on we'll see, I'll quote the rest of the paragraphs later. So the Lord, who had assumed the form of dwarf Brahmana, then went to the place of sacrifice arranged by Bali Maharaj, who was performing a great yagya under the guidance of Shukracharya and the priests of Bhrigu dynasty. This is the 18th chapter, text 12. And in that purport, Prabhupada actually says that the Lord's form was so effulgent that all the priests, brahmanas, kings, and even Bali Maharaj himself rose from their seats to receive him. The appearance of the Lord immediately sanctified the entire sacrificial arena. And in the next chapter, the 19th chapter, more about Shukracharya is mentioned, how learned he was and great thinker, Ushana. It's very important to recognize that, because if as an organization we only prioritize the, oh yes, big thinking and we read all the books, but if we don't have, like, say, temples, where will devotees go? But if we only prioritize properties and wealth and money, and then we will only have devotees who will just eat and sleep and enjoy Harinam. And there will be no philosophy, there will be no surrender, there would be no teaching, no learning. So Prabhupada purport in the 19th chapter, when he's speaking about Shukracharya, Prabhupada says, Shukracharya, being the guru of the demons, naturally gave advice according to material calculation. The great thinker, material calculation. He was concerned with Bali's material prosperity, not his spiritual benefit. So when Shukracharya sees Bali Maharaj, his eyes just start blazing. So he's in charge of wealth and pleasure and security, And then he's like, oh no, my dear Bali, stop my child. This is not an ordinary boy. He immediately, through his mystic power, understood that this boy is Bali Maharaj. So Prabhupada describes how sharp Shukracharya was that he could catch this. And then he knew, he will strip you of your kingdom. Don't be deceived. Just like the Dashavatara Stuti said that chala means to trick, being tricky. So protect your wealth, protect your throne. That's exactly what psychologically we also hear our Venus is saying. Think of yourself, think of your reputation, think of your comfort, think of your pleasures. There's always that voice. So those words, we can say that it's logical. At the same time, it has a smell of fear. So our acharyas actually described that. And when in the 19th chapter, 21st verse, Bali Maharaj says, many men have broken their promises out of greed, thinking wealth will protect them. But wealth never stays. Better give everything to Vishnu, for whatever is lost to him is the greatest gain. So here we're coming to that theme of wealth versus prosperity. Venus is wealth. Jupiter is prosperity. Venus is people who have like Swiss account and they have a lot of money inside, but maybe they're living pathetically, trying to hide all their money, not really enjoying, not really prospering, not really investing their money in good projects and growing. So there's a big difference between Venus and Jupiter. Jupiter is where we know this is a place where I should give, being generous, investing in right people, investing in right projects, using our energies in such a way that, like Srila Prabhupada, he left India with 40 rupees and then he built 108 temples. That's the energy of Jupiter, that's prosperity. But somebody who's only attached to wealth, then their mentality would be like Bali Maharaj is saying, many men break their promises. They make promises out of greed, thinking wealth will protect them. And I've seen in my personal experience that sometimes devotees take initiation vows, they vow to chant 16 rounds, follow regulative principles, and then they may fall prey exactly to this mentality of Venus, not keep up to that. And unfortunately, I see that they get more and more and more in trouble, all kinds of trouble. Loss of money, money loss will always happen, besides maybe losing relationships and so many. Venus can bring health issues, relationship breakups, troubled children, loss of wealth and money and property. All these things can happen. So it's very tricky. It's a very tricky planet. It looks like I'm investing here, I'll be safe, but wealth never stays, Bali Maharaj says. Jupiter is like Vamanadev. You look at him, oh, little baby boy, but then, he keeps a step to conquer the whole world. Prabhupada, in that purport to that verse, he says, although warned by his spiritual master, Bali Maharaj decided not to follow that advice, because it was against the principle of dharma. In fact, Bali Maharaj was blessed by rejecting such a guru who acted against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Again, this higher level of understanding Guru Tattva comes. Bali Maharaj was very loyal follower of Shukracharya, but he was not a loyal follower of Shukracharya because of Shukracharya as a person. He was a loyal follower of the Guru Parampara, which means the principles. What's the principle? To please the Supreme Lord, to be aligned to the highest purpose. So this is very interesting. A lot of people ask this question, oh, the gurus fell, what to do, we can't trust in the organization. But that's like a very neophyte level of understanding Guru. It's not the person. Guru Tattva is very complex, and Bali Maharaj got it. So that's why he was able to perform this action of choosing Guru. Speak of Guru Jupiter, which is the planet ruled by Vamanadev. Brihaspati's mentality is also like that, and Brihaspati is not present here. But then we are seeing the conflict between Shukracharya and Vamanadev. So interesting. I found this to be so revelatory. Even astrology texts don't describe it like Bhagavatam explains the psychology of Shukracharya, the psychology of Brihaspati, the psychology of Vamanadev. The whole thing really like opened for me. And then I'm able to see how even in our devotional service, sometimes this conflict comes. We become too fixed upon our ideas. This is the way I think ISKCON should be. That's a very Venetian way of thinking. But Jupiter way of thinking would be much broader. And how we can understand that will be understood by Brihaspati's, what are the qualities Brihaspati has. But before that, when Bali Maharaj, at that point when he bows down his head, he doesn't bow down his head to Shukracharya. He's bowing his head down to the Guru, the master of the Guru, because he's able to focus on Guru Tattva, which is not just Supreme Lord, but also the dedication to Shukracharya is shown through his dedication to Vamanadev. So it's a very deeper call of truth. That's why it's the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's like, let me lose the worlds. Let me lose the worlds, but I'm not going to lose my devotion. I'm not going to lose my word to the Guru Parampara. So not my chance to serve the Lord. That is what a guru teaches us, how to be aligned to God's will. Within our organization, we have done some mistakes, like the gurus thinking this person should not marry, this person should marry that person, right? All those kind of mistakes we made. That is like Shukracharya thinking Bali Maharaj should not do this. It's like a guru when they try to override a disciple's life decisions and choices based on what they think is secure or right, instead of aligning to the Supreme. That is what the difference between the right guru and the wrong guru. And interestingly, in my experience, I see a lot of people, they think astrology is Vedic. By the way, I wrote a book called How to Mess Up Your Life with Astrology. So there's a lot you can go wrong with if you end up with a guru like Shukracharya. Sometimes some devotees may have a certain value system. They think success means money. So when somebody goes with an astrological chart, they'll say, oh, Prabhuji, you don't have success in your life. You will never attain success. This is a real story. Some astrologer in Mayapur told a devotee, you will not have success in your life. And this devotee was a little bit depressed because he had left so many things in his material world. He had come to Sridham Mayapur to make his life a success. Then he came to me for a reading and I said, Prabhu, your Jupiter is very, very nice. No, you have possibility for spiritual success. He said, oh, you said the word success. This Prabhu told me that I can never be successful. And then I said, this is very interesting. Please go back to that astrologer and ask him, please tell me the definition of success. Because I didn't want to say anything. I wanted him to learn from the person. And then he went back to the astrologer and said, Prabhu, you said that I will not be successful. Can you please tell me what you mean by success? And the devotee said, you will never make money. You will never be in high positions. You will never become temple president or GBC, or you will never be a guru. You know, all the Venus aspects of position, power, wealth. And this devotee said, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm actually looking for the spiritual fulfillment. I want to find absorption in studying and serving my guru's instruction. And then the person said, that you have. I meant the success. And then the devotee came back to me like, thank you, Masterji. You know, it was so good to clarify the definition of success. So sometimes even as devotees, we may think that this is success and we may think this is failure. But how do we know? So in this story, we see if the mercy of the Lord is given, if we are aligned to the Lord's will, even if it's a fall down, because you know, in some cases, for some devotees, even fall down is the greatest advancement. It's actually a protection. It's actually a blessing, because maybe they're going Shukracharya way. Jai Shri Shri Vamanadev ki jai. Look at how cute Jagannath is looking as Vamanadev. Another angle of looking at Venus, Shukra, Venus is always a little bit scared. It's scared of losing power, losing position, not having something to control. That's the nature of Shukra or Venus. Whereas faith, surrender, is more the Vamanadev mood, which is more Jupiterian energy, which is broad-mindedness. And Vadiraja Tirtha explains the Pingaksha Vikramatu Rangadi Sainya. That was already quoted. The next verse. Shringara Padanuka Tungagra Bhinna Kanakanganga Pati Tatini Tungati Mangala Taranga Bibhuta Bhaja Kanga Ghavamana Namaha. So in his little boy form as Vamanadev, he only asked for 3 steps of land. But when he expanded, he became Trivikrama. With 1 step, he covered the heavens. With another step, he covered the whole earth. And with the 3rd step, he rested that foot on Bali Maharaj, the greatest Pingaksha Vikramatung Rangadi Sainya. He was the master of all the three worlds already. So on that Bali Maharaj, the lotus feet of Vamanadev was kept. And then the Devas were looking at this whole pastime in astonishment. And the hair was standing on the end. That's the one, Tungati Mangala Tarangabi Bhuta. Because the Devas were wondering, what is happening here? How is this sudden transformation? So like the big king becoming small to ask the Lord to put his feet on his head. So as his foot reached beyond the universe, that tip of the nail which Bali Maharaj had washed Vamanadev's lotus feet, and that watered toe broke the universal covering, and that's when Ganga was able to flow to this world. So he's expanded to bring that expansion to humanity. And what was the second point here? And Vadiraja is also concluding with a prayer. May that same Vamanadev, who performs such astonishing deeds, be remembered and worshipped. For by bowing to him, one is purified within and without. Now, I wanted to bring up a little bit about Brihaspati. In Srimad Bhagavatam, again, certain advanced cantos, we have to be the bottleneck canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 9th canto. We need to be qualified to digest it. There are certain stories. One of such stories is when Brihaspati's wife, Brihaspati is the lord of the Daityas, the Devas, and astrologically, Jupiter is under Brihaspati. So we have to observe the psychology of how Brihaspati handles the crisis in his life. So Chandra, moon god, he kidnaps Tara, who's the wife of Brihaspati. Ooh, scandal. Scandal in the heavens. And it's a chaos. But what is very interesting is they have a child also. Tara and Buddha, Tara and Chandra give birth to Buddha. Buddha is Mercury, the planet which is the smartest in astrology in terms of knowledge. But who raises Buddha is Brihaspati. He's not even the biological father, but he raises Buddha. So that shows that broad-mindedness of Brihaspati. Brihaspati did not want a war. He just said, give my wife back. So there's a broad-mindedness. Shukracharya would put a fight up. He would have destroyed everything. So the mentality of Shukra is like, if I don't get my desires met, I will kill. But the mentality of Jupiter, Brihaspati, is much more broad-minded. So the promise that Bali Maharaj did not want to go back, it's aligning more to Jupiter energy, not Venus. So we have promise in our mind kept to our senses and our mind and our enjoyment. But then we also have our promises kept to Krishna, to Guru Parampara, to the Vaishnavas. And that promise remains, even if the promise we made to the person, maybe the Shukracharya, leaves, the promise still remains because Shukracharya, in the sense of Guru, connected us with the Sampradaya. So that's kind of my understanding when it comes to why some people get attached to the person Guru. And when the person Guru has trouble, their faith is lost. But if we are in a Sattva Guna level of understanding Guru, understanding the even progeny, I'm thinking, for Brihaspati, it's like, she's my wife and it's the child, it's my child. Although the relationship in astrology between Jupiter and Mercury is complicated. And also the relationship between Moon and Buddha, Mercury, is also complicated. But again, I feel that Bhagavatam reveals so much. It reveals everything. I think what is not in Srimad Bhagavatam is nowhere. What is anywhere in the world is in Srimad Bhagavatam. Whether we speak about astrology, we speak about cosmology, whether we speak about philosophy. So when Bali Maharaj actually says these words literally, I don't fear hell, and I don't fear poverty, I don't fear ocean of distress, or even death itself, as much as I fear cheating a Brahmana or breaking a promise. See, that's the consciousness, that's the mood, that's the alignment. All the material opulences of this world are inevitably separated from the possessor at death. That's higher understanding of Venus. Therefore, if this Brahmana Vamanadev is not satisfied with what I've given, why not offer him whatever else I'm destined to lose, eventually everything anyway? So that's a very profound statement if we apply that psychologically in our life. When things don't go my way, that's my Venus not being cooperative. But then we have a bigger plan if we keep aligned to the Guru Parampara, to our promises to the Guru. And I'm telling you, like year after year, I'm seeing that example. Those devotees, somehow or another, they remain in the association of devotees, somehow or another take shelter of the holy names. But as soon as they disconnect, their karma just bombards. So a lot of times people ask, doesn't astrology change when we become devotees? Only if we strictly follow, only if we completely stay aligned. Not like if I do 20% Krishna consciousness, okay, 20% of my karma may be controlled. But if I'm doing 100% Krishna conscious, then. But then if I stop doing that 100% and I go back to 2%, then the karma will again manifest. Sometimes we don't understand. So the Jupiter mentality is basically being selfless. Not selfless in the sense I don't take care of my health or I don't take care of my mental needs and my nature. Not in that sense. But selfless means may Lord's will be done. That applies also in the leadership way for a guru, even as a teacher, as a leader. We can either have the mentality of Shukracharya or we can have the mentality of Brihaspati, forgiving, compassionate, broad-minded, wise. Jupiter is known as the wisest planet. It's not so much about knowledge. Buddha would be more knowledge, knowing. But Brihaspati is about wisdom. To know how to discriminate, to know how to make decisions that brings good to all, not create conflict. And also, Brihaspati's mood is like aligned to higher purpose. Similarly, we see in Srimad Bhagavatam when Prithu Maharaj and Indra has a conflict. I was thinking if I was God, I would say Prithu Maharaj should win, but I am not. Krishna says, no, he tells Prithu Maharaj, don't do the 100th yagya, let Indra have it. So, from a human perspective, we say, why? Why did he let Indra win? Indra was cheating, stole the horses, he dressed as a sannyasi, and he did so much nonsense. So why would he make him? Because he is broad-minded. Because Krishna is impartial. He sees what brings universal peace. So as a leader also, I was thinking, we should not judge people according to the actions, but sometimes we have to see what is good for the greater good. Otherwise, like Brihaspati, if he was in the mentality of normal planet or normal psychology, then he would have made a huge mess with this Chandra. But in fact, he doesn't. He doesn't make a mess. He doesn't even hate moon. In Vedic astrology, Jupiter does not hate moon. Which could have been if in a human society, if somebody stole somebody's wife, they'll naturally become enemies. So it's another level of psychology. I was thinking this morning, do I have moments where sticking to principles or honoring God's will is going to cost me something material? All the time. So sometimes we have to see what is the cost of letting control to Him, giving Him the land, the 3 steps of land. So Bali Maharaj literally lost the whole world, but he gained the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. He actually gained the proper mercy of Guru. And this has always been fascinating for me, that Jupiter, the energy, changed his life for the better. So that's for us. If we somehow or another stick to Guru's instructions, then our life will be saved. Okay. And on the other hand, Venus driven is more fury. In fact, like I said, Venus, Shukracharya and Parashurama. That was also mind-boggling for me, like why there is this connection of Parashurama with Venus? Because Venus seems like a pleasurable planet, happy planet, enjoying planet. How could Parashurama, who's like violence personified, be the lord of Venus? What's the connection? Because there is that fury attached. And in Sattva Guna is Parashuram, of course, it's transcendental Venus energy of whatever does not serve your purpose, chop it off. That's Parashurama's psychology. Chop it off. What does not serve your purpose? But the Rajasic level, which is Shukracharya level, whenever my desires are not fulfilled, chop off the person who's getting in the way. So the Rajasic way of Venusian energy. It's more, Venus can also be a little bit more revengeful. It can be more like punishing if the pride is endured. Anyway, these are all like psychological aspects. thinking selfishly versus thinking selflessly, prioritizing wealth over prioritizing prosperity, and also seeing people as enemies or seeing people as friends. In the 7th canto, Srila Prahlad Maharaj, when he's taught the art of Shukracharya, the diplomacy, then he's taught all the sciences of how to see someone as a friend, how to see someone as an enemy. Prahlad says, I don't like this. I'm not a merchant. I'm not going to go and tell the Lord, I give you this, you give me that. That's not my mood. So I'm not going to be that person who's just going to say, this is my friend, this is my enemy. No, I'm no merchant, no bargain I seek. That was the mood of Prahlad. And when you see that Prahlad Maharaj, when he was talking to Hiranyakashipu, his mood was very Jupiterian, more Vamanadev mood, where he was like being tricky. Prahlad was being a little bit tricky. Tat sadhu manye suravarya dehinam sada samudvigna dhiyama sadgrahat. First he says, O king of the demons, O greatest asura. He's glorifying him, giving him the position he deserves. That's Jupiter. Say the truth for what it is, being objective. Then he says, Sada samudvigna dhiyama sadgrahat. Then he's revealing the truth that a person who's attached to materialistic life is always conquered by anxiety. He says embarrassed by anxiety. That's Venus. He's literally saying, hey, dad, move from there. But he's also being wise. Tat sadhu manye. He's not saying Narada Muni said. Not Narada told me. He's saying Tat sadhu manye. As I have heard from my spiritual masters. Because he doesn't want to put Narada Muni in trouble. That's wisdom. He's very, very clever as well. So I was just thinking, Prahlad Maharaj is giving that perfect example of how to be balanced devotee. He wasn't arrogant at all. He wasn't trying to shove it to the face of Hiranyakashipu. He's actually giving him the respect. O greatest of the demons, O king of the demons. He's being very respectful. But then he's also saying the truth. So I really found that. And then Sada samudvigna dhiyama sadgrihat hitvatma patam grihamanda kupam vanam gato yadharimashrayeta. So he's saying that if we have fallen into the deep dark well where there is no water, there's only starvation, what's the point? What's the point? That's Venus. That's Shukracharya's path. Stay, hold, hang on, don't let go. That's the reason that even Shukracharya went and blocked the whole of the pot of water that Bali Maharaj was about to give the promise. And of course, Bali Maharaj took a stick and pricked it. And then he pricked the eye of Shukracharya. So Shukracharya lost an eye in this pastime. So the point is, we have to be wise in looking at our life decisions, not make stupid choices. Hitva atmapatam grihamanda kupam. If my desire is, I want a good family to serve Krishna, that's one thing. I want to enjoy with this person. I want to control this person. That is hitvatma patam grihamanda kupam. That mentality is negative for our spiritual life. And then we fall down. The other day when Ajitananda Prabhu was giving class, he was giving the concept of Nishkama and Sakama. So Sakama is Venus, having an expectation, having a desire. I will do this, I will get this. I will do this service and everybody will clap for me. I will learn so many verses and sing well and I'll become very famous. That is Sakama Bhakti. And that will give me a position like Prahlad Maharaj is clearly saying, that I will be in the deep dark well of material existence where there will be no nourishment. I will only starve in that. So even while performing devotional service, I have to be constantly aware of my motivation. Why am I doing this service? What am I trying to control? Do I think I know everything? We have to be clear to get out of that deep dark well. And the same thing, whether it is a relationship where I'm putting myself in the center, which is Venetian energy, which is more the Shukracharya's teachings, or is it more Brahaspati teachings? What can I contribute in this relationship? How can I serve in this relationship? How can I uplift this person? How can I encourage this person to be the best version of themselves? There is a guru in Brazil, his name is Dhanvantari Maharaj. So when he gives initiations, he, besides the 4 regulative principles, he makes them commit to the 5th one. And you know what is the 5th one? He says, you should promise that you shall serve the mission of Srila Prabhupada whenever, how is that? He says that? As required. Something like, he kind of radiates that Jupiter energy for me. He doesn't say, you have to stay here and serve me. He doesn't say, you guys, you're my disciples, you should serve me here. He kind of like empowers these devotees to say, you're a servant of Srila Prabhupada. Wherever Prabhupada calls you, wherever the service to Srila Prabhupada is, you should go. That's another regulative principle of you. So I really kind of like appreciated that broad-mindedness, because in the past, within our organization, we have done Rajasic guru empowerment type of things, where we thought what is best for a devotee is decided by me. But this story, this pastime, it shares another level of truth. In Bali Maharaj's case, if he had listened to Shukracharya and clung to his opulence, he may have stayed still the king, but at what cost? That's a question we could ask in our lives too. He would have dishonored Vishnu, and that result would come. So again, going back to some of the practical examples, I see that sometimes devotees give justifications or escapism as to why they cannot remain in sadhana bhakti, why they are not able to practice. Oh, because this is too hard and this is not practical. I had to go and earn money, and therefore, so there is an element of deviation. But by the way, remember the story of Shukracharya? He also deviated because he was a classmate with Brihaspati. I think you came a little later. I was quoting the story. He's the son of Brigu. They went to school together, Brihaspati and Shukracharya. They learned the same things. But at one point he felt, oh, they're making Brihaspati the guru, and he felt a little bit neglected. And then he went and did all these austerities. And it's interesting, he deviated. And then his disciple is deviating. He didn't listen to him either. I was thinking that's another interesting. So the mercy behind Vamanadev's trick was to purify Bali Maharaj's heart. So sometimes Krishna will trick us into choosing Maya or Krishna. Krishna may put a circumstance. Are you going to choose the army or are you going to choose me? Like Arjuna and Duryodhana. Are you going to choose the Akshohini army, or are you going to choose me without any weapons? I'm not going to lift any weapon. That's a total trick. But then, of course, Arjuna was wise to choose Krishna. So I am not saying that all the Venus things are bad. It's not that beautiful temple is bad, which is very much Venus energy, astrological language. But we also need quality devotees. It's not that property or project over people. We should be thinking of what is good for this devotee rather than what is good for the project. That would be a balance between Venus and Jupiter. And in an organization, if there is so much money, so much glamour, but it lacks spiritual wisdom, it lacks genuine empowerment, it's not sustainable. At the same time, if an organization is only focusing on divine wisdom and they don't have proper facility for devotees, people are not properly fed, and all the brahmacharis are so skinny that they can hardly lift a mridanga, then that is also a problem. Because a shukra, the semen in the body, is necessary to perform devotional service. So maintaining that is also Krishna conscious. So when we look at Srimad Bhagavatam, we can see that interconnection, we can see that interdependence of all the personalities, all the psychological aspects, and a good devotee is able to apply that harmoniously, without any extremes, without any fanaticism, without any arrogant thinking that what I know is better. And one side thing, but I want to really say that in the Leela of Bali Maharaj, there was a sister of Bali Maharaj. Some Purana says it was also the daughter. So in the previous, her name was Ratnamala. And she was apparently the younger sister of Bali Maharaj. So when Vamanadev first appeared, she became so affectionate. She saw Vamanadev and she was like, she felt motherly affection for for Vamanadev. And then Krishna seeing her desire, immediately said, I'm going to give you a chance to be that mother, to feed me. And you know who she became? She became Putana. Because once Vamanadev subdued Bali Maharaj, the only person who was really happy was Bali Maharaj and of course Vindhyavali, the wife, because she was also a devotee. But Ratnamala, became extremely resentful. She became so resentful that these two things in the presence of the Lord, that's why we should be very careful what you pray, what you're thinking during Kirtan in front of the Lord, because the Lord is noticing our intentions, the Lord is noticing our emotions. So when Ratnamala thought, oh my God, he's such a cute baby, and her motherly affection came, Tatastu, the wish was granted, you're going to get a chance. But then immediately she felt resentful and angry and revengeful. And Krishna said, Tatastu. So the mixture of the two gave opportunity for Putana to feed Krishna her poisoned milk. So that kind of shows to us that whatever desires we carry, especially when we are performing sadhana bhakti, Krishna will give a chance to manifest that desire, and then we would have to experience that desire. So that's why we have to always constantly pray, Jagannath, may your will, not mine, be done. Don't put me through my desires. This is quoted in, the first one I quoted is from Brahma Vaivarta Purana, that says that he's a sister. In Garga Samhita, the little text difference is it says it was his daughter. Yeah. Whether it's daughter or sister, but that's the story is, how do you say, proved by both these Puranas. Oh yeah, there was the other one. There's 3 lessons. Okay, I'll pause here if you have any questions and if I remember that point. Yes, Prabhu. There's a class by Romapad Maharaj, and he goes more into the anarthas, and while speaking about Putana, he gets into the whole, the mentality to be devious, to be cheating tendency is connected. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that every demon has an anartha connected. There's a relevance. So in this connection, one thing what I remember is also, the acharyas say that Krishna, he watches our actions and our intentions. When our actions are wrong, but our intentions are right. Let's take example of Vidura's wife. When Krishna visited Hastinapur, she was so excited that Krishna is there. She was peeling the bananas and then giving him banana peel and throwing away the banana. So the action was apparently off, but her intentions were pure. And Krishna actually accepted the banana peel and actually purified her. So the mood of Krishna is Bhavagrahi Janardana. He sees your intention and your action. If your action is wrong, he'll reject your action. He'll take your intention. Hari bol Nitai Gaur Premanande. Okay. But if the intention is wrong and the action is right, which was Putana's case, because she was doing a good action, she wanted to feed Krishna. I want to feed Krishna milk. But her intention was poisonous. She had smeared poison. Then what Krishna does, he will honor the action of the person and he will forgive the intention. That's why he's Jagannath. That's why he's Krishna. But yeah, so I think it's going in that angle. So when there is a contradiction, then Krishna gives a chance to improve whatever it is that is lacking. In certain cases, our action may be right. We may be super Sankirtan devotees distributing 1,000 books a day. But then if our intentions are not aligned, Krishna will give a chance. He'll accept that and say, you've done the best action, my dear child. But those are the devotees that Krishna will give a chance, like Bali Maharaj. Because Bali Maharaj was that kind of person who had done a lot, conquered all the 3 worlds. But then Vamanadev said, now is the time I really have to give you the true success. But because Ratnamala was not yet on that level, then she built resentment. It sometimes happens also to devotees when we are not saying, Krishna, may your will be done, and see that this is actually, I may not know why. Now, once I heard this class, it always remained in my head. Krishna knows what's around the corner. I don't know. I can only see what my headlight shows me, the next meter. That's all I can see, especially when it's raining, it's dark, and my windshield is not working properly. What can I see? Nothing. But Krishna knows what's around the corner. So what my understanding of how to resolve this contradiction is, Krishna does not look at our life now, here, 10 years, this person did not chant, did not do this. No, he looks at us through like a movie earlier we used to have these negatives of the film. So you will see the whole thing. Good example is Bharat Maharaj. He was Bharat Maharaj, he was great devotee, becomes attached to the deer and then becomes the deer. And so Krishna doesn't look only at the deer life and say, gone, you're a hopeless case. He gives the next chance, then he becomes Jada Bharata. So Krishna's plan is through the lifetimes. It's never just one act, one phase of life. That's why sustainability is very important. It has to be balanced. Does it answer the question? Kind of. You want to add something about Prabhuji's question? Contradiction.
Krishna just allows it. Okay, you want this, okay, experience this.
Oh yeah. And Vaisheshika Prabhu often says, to that devotee, when that happens, he wanted it, and that thing comes, and you're like, get it off me, I don't want it. Because the same material desire the person was so attached to becomes such a trouble. Meaning, even there, Krishna shows mercy. But I think, depending on our intention, and that's why I feel the safest prayer is to always ask Krishna, may your will be done. May your will be done. Because the more I focus on this is what I think is good for my spiritual life, we may get entangled into a trap. Yeah, thank you. That was, I think Prabhu's answer was more direct to your... Any other comments or any other questions? From the pastime point of view, I'm thinking when Shukracharya surrenders to Vamanadev and chants holy name, that would be the perfect alignment. In other words, we should not see Shukracharya as the enemy in this pastime. Similarly, we should not see our, like I said, the opulence, a beautiful temple, a beautiful plate of prasad is also Venus. Beautiful kirtan. I mean, how many of us like good kirtaniyas? Who likes good kirtan? That's a Venus energy. We don't want someone singing off tune and wrong beats and you feel crazy. So that is Venus. So it is required, pleasantness is required, but we need to know its place. You know, like the other day I was saying Ajitananda Prabhu, when he gave class, he was speaking about going from Sakama to Nishkama. Having Sakama in the beginning is not a problem. Like when a 2-year-old wants to eat chocolate 5 times a day, it's not abnormal. But you're 20-year-old and you're doing that, that's a problem. Similarly, when you're 1-year-old and you have difficulty to write, it's tolerable. But when you're a 20-year-old and you don't know how to write, it's not called advancement. So similarly, we may start our Krishna consciousness with Sakama. We may have desires. Especially as women, we have certain body, we have certain psychology, we have psychophysical needs. And we need to honor them, but we should know its place and we should know what it means to rise above it. And it should be done in Sattva Guna. In Tamas Guna, it is to completely negate those needs. Completely negate. Again, not eat properly, not be nourished, not do things that's nourishing for us. One example I can think is distributing books but not reading those books, for example. But reading those books is Venus, like enjoying Shastra, how many of you have that experience when you're studying proper books and you're like, wow, this is so nourishing. Yeah. See, that we need that also, not just austerity. Austerity is more Saturn energy. But enjoyment, pleasure, it has its place. I will give an example of salt and sugar, right? Salt is like the austerity. Without salt, the food is going to taste very... Without salt, the food is going to taste very bland. But imagine... Like the other day it happened with Charanamrita. instead of sugar, we had the salt. But imagine the opposite. In khichdi, somebody puts sugar instead of salt. In a sabji, paneer sabji, it's supposed to be capsicum and potato. And instead of salt, somebody puts sugar. And a lot of it. Okay? And so you got this big super feast of Vamanadev festival. Rice has sugar in it. All things have sugar in it. That would be excessive Venus energy. You cannot feel nourished. You feel like, where is salt? But imagine salt in Charanamrita, that would be too much Saturn energy. Means too much austerity, too much based on following rules and rituals and being too strict and strong and no nourishment and no sense of understanding what you like about Krishna consciousness. So there has to be a good balance. Maya, is also a servant of Krishna. She's the Durga. She's the fortress. She protects our consciousness. She's not going to allow me to go to Krishna unless I purify my consciousness. So she's like a fort. I cannot trick her. I cannot trick her by saying I have desires inside, but then I pretend like I don't have. She catches us. So the point is to be honest. Krishna says in Gita, right, Mityachara, we should not pretend that I am here when I am actually here. Otherwise it's the andhaya thandai upaniyamanas. I'll remain in the deep dark well. I may become a great, externally I may become a great leader. I may get positions. I may learn all the verses of all scriptures. I may go to all the holy places. I may have 90,000 disciples. But then I will not feel nourishment. I will not feel happy inside. So there has to be the discrimination. What is nourishing for me so I can love Krishna? Because scriptures do say that, I found that quote when Prabhu gave class the other day. What was that? Poverty, I'm summarizing it, okay? I'm paraphrasing it. Poverty ruins everything. So if we're too poor, if we're too weak, it's very difficult to serve Krishna and think of Krishna. If we have too many material problems, it's very difficult to chant. So there has to be the prasadam plate needs to have salt and spicy and sour and sweet, and that's life. I don't know if that's answering your question. Okay. Any other answer to her question? No. You have anything to say about how to balance or?
Plate of prasad.